Hi everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video I'm going to answer a simple question for patch 9.2. Is it worth coming back to World of Warcraft for this patch? This is a question that most of us who quit the game for a while, take a break for a while, end up asking at some point. So if you're asking it right now, I will be happy to help. I also want to talk about my more unusual aspect of my perspective on this as a player who has come back, because I'm coming back as a casual player. I was actually a Mythic Raid lead for most of BFA and most of Shadowlands, and then I ended up taking a break during Sanctum of Domination, a much needed break due to much burnout. And for me, the experience is definitely very different coming in and playing the game as a casual player, experiencing it as a casual player, and I want to talk about the things that are much better and also the things that are much worse. Before we dive into that though, let me take 1 minute to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Mech Arena. Mech Arena is a 5v5 mech shooter. It's casual, it's fun, and it looks way better than I ever thought a game on a phone would look. They've also just released the amazing Pilots feature. You can customize your pilot skills to fit your builds and specialize in the sort of gameplay that you want. On top of the usual updates, there's also going to be a Brazilian Carnival event and also a St. Patrick's Day event, which is close to my heart as an Irishman. And the best news of all is that the game is completely free to play. It's on Android and iOS right now. You can use my personal link in the description down below or scan the QR code, which should be up here on screen. If you do that, you'll get the Steel Reaper skin, 500 A coins, 70,000 credits to help kickstart your game. If you're quick, you can even add me to friends and we can play some matches together, so don't wait around. The first thing that I really have to talk about, the thing that stands out to me more than anything else about this patch, is actually the zone itself, Zereth Mortis. The zone for me has been an absolute joy to explore and a very big contrast to when I quit the game in 9.1 and we were exploring Korthia. It was dull, it was drab, it was grey. Zereth Mortis though, it's beautiful, it's absolutely gorgeous with really unique geometric designs. It's sort of very futuristic but also very familiar. One of the things that I really love about this zone, and that a lot of people complained about with the Maw zones in the Shadowlands, was that those zones were just jam-packed full of mobs. There's actually a very different design philosophy here in Zereth Mortis. In the western side of the zone, which is lush and green and beautiful, you have a lot of actually neutral enemies and even friendlies wandering around, going about their business. There's very little there that's actually directly hostile to you, and that gives you a really good sense of this zone being an actual real place. You know, there isn't an enemy patrolling like 5 foot outside of your base. It actually makes sense. In the eastern part of the zone, which is all dry and deserty and arid, you've got a lot more enemies over there, right? The Mossworn have set up their bases there, and it does have that feeling of these more military camps set up as part of an invasion. There's also a whole bunch of treasures and secrets to discover throughout the zone, and one of my actual favorite things to do this patch was to try those out without a guide. Right? This was one of the benefits of being a casual player now, is that I'm not in any sort of rush to gather these up so I can compete in a raid or keep up, do things efficiently. I can do things at my own pace, so I can go and I can spend a while doing that jumping puzzle, or I can find a chest and not know how to unlock it, and I don't need to run off to Google to try to open it. It's totally fine. I'll maybe see someone else doing it. Yeah, I might figure it out myself. Maybe that's a little bit of a push, but the point is that I can take my time. Now, the bad side of this is that in terms of gameplay, Zereth Mortis is still essentially your typical WoW endgame zone that we've seen in every real major patch for the last few expansions. There's a big weekly quest for a nice big reward. There are dailies every single day. There are world quests every day. There are rares spawning on different rotations that you can hunt down together. There's a world boss, all that sort of stuff. But it's the same sort of routine that we are used to. That hasn't changed up overly much. Though I do have to say I'm very happy to see the puzzles coming back. These were a big feature of Nazjatar in patch 8.1, I think it was. Was that 8.2? Actually, it was 8.2. Excuse me. Patch 8.2. The puzzles from Nazjatar. I love those things. They're some of my favorite world quests, and there's a few new varieties here as well. A nice perk, though, that is worth pointing out if you hate those things, is that you can now actually spend this renewable energy source with your little robot companion to just skip those world quests. So yeah, you can actually knock those out instantly without having to ever do the puzzle, but you can only skip one of them every hour or so. So if you're going to go crazy grinding all of the optional ones for very minimal rewards, you do get punished for that. You won't be able to. But if you're just doing the mandatory, well, quote unquote mandatory ones, if you want to knock out every single world quest, you can just skip them, which I think is actually pretty great. Now, there are actually a couple of really cool features which are part of Zereth Mortis that unlock. We'll talk about it in the time gating section as to when they unlock, but the first one is called protoform synthesis. And very simply, this is a method for you to craft pets and to craft mounts. How this works is actually pretty simple. Once you've unlocked the synthesis forge through doing the story quests and progressing through the sort of zone-wide progress bar of the Cypher of the first ones, you'll be able to start collecting rare patterns that drop off certain enemies in the zone, and also collecting the rare parts of those enemies that you need in order to complete those patterns. And it actually ends up being quite a fun, holistic way of doing it, right? That you're fighting these sort of robotic style enemies and you're collecting the different parts out of them and then sort of rebuilding enemies that look like that as battle pets or as mounts. If you enjoyed the crafting system in Mechagon, I think this is actually a bit of an upgrade over it. It's very, very cool. The other major system, which unfortunately I can't show you because it is time gated, and yes, we're talking about time gating next. It is time gated and it's not going to be open for, believe it or not, until 2 months into the patch release. It's actually tier set crafting in the Creation Forge. We'll talk about tier sets as well, but just know that they are back and you'll actually be able to craft them up. And I believe that this energy that you need to craft them is also going to be account wide, which means that when you get there with your main character, you might need to craft maybe 1 or 2 pieces of tier set just to make sure you get the full set, get the full bonus, and you're good. And then you can start saving up that energy, and when you then come around to playing on an alt character, you can actually go in and craft them up some tier set gear, get some really good gear ready to go, get you into the content you want to get into much, much faster. So yeah, I think this is a great system whenever it is actually turned on in the game. That brings us on quite neatly to time gating. Time gating sucks. This has really stood out to me coming at the game now as a casual player, as opposed to coming at it as, raid leading a mythic guild. While raid leading the mythic guild, there was so much to do in those first couple of weeks, getting everything organized, just the logistics, the planning for stepping into the raid, getting everything done. It's just constant discussions on Discord, constantly looking up strategies, min-maxing everything within those first few weeks to get the maximum rewards and really pushing things, organizing people. It was crazy. There was a ton going on. Coming at it though now, as a casual player, the time gating stands out so much. It just feels really, really, really bad when you finish one chapter of the story and then you're just left standing there in the main base of Zereth Mortis, and Bolvar is standing there. He's looking at you, you're looking at him, and he has nothing more to say until that weekly reset comes around and the servers tick over. It's just a complete immersion breaker, right? Knowing that you're waiting for this arbitrarily set timer out in the real world. You're trying to get stuck into like this zone, and this zone is very immersive. It's very cool. There's cool lore. It's a beautiful zone. I really feel encouraged to explore, and I really enjoy exploring the zone. But it's this constant reminder with how the questing works and with how the story is time gated out that you are ultimately working on this fake timer. Contrary to the popular meme that the devs don't play their own game, I actually suspect in this case that the opposite is true, that the devs actually play their game too much, and that it doesn't stick out as much to them because there's so much other stuff going on, like, their jobs, designing the game. And I feel like this is doubly true this early on in the patch, where we don't have that tier set crafting. because that gives you an avenue, I think, as a casual player to have something to work towards. That, okay, all the story quests are now unlocked by Timegating. They're open. I can do all of those at my leisure. I have my tier set stuff happening. I get my tier sets and I can step into the dungeons, right? Crafted gear has come back to a reasonable price. I can get that and step into the dungeons. And there's a much smoother progression there. Whereas at the start of this patch, with the time gating and how it works, that smoothness of progression, that smoothness of stuff being there, it just doesn't happen. I should also at this point mention the Cypher of the first ones. This is sort of main progress path throughout the zone, right? That as you are adventuring around Zereth Mortis, you're collecting these ciphers of the first ones, which enable you to start doing research at this cool little console in like the basement of some broker dude's cave, I guess. But this console gives you a little robot companion called Pokepo, who's very cute. He hangs out with you, helps you in combat, and he can do a whole bunch of cool stuff that as you unlock the powers of the Cypher as you progress further on, like helping you find secret treasures, helping you unlock new daily quests, powering up your character, powering him up, letting him pilot the little robots around the zone. A whole bunch of really fun stuff that's very, very cool. But again, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is time-gated. Now, here's the thing that might get me in trouble with some people. I don't hate this idea of time-gating, though, in general. I actually think this is okay because it's based in world that, you know, I collect these research materials, I bring them to the researcher, and then I see him working away and it's going to take him, you know, a day or two to get through it. I kind of feel like, okay, you know, that is in world time gating. That doesn't feel as bad as Bolvar just stood there with nothing to say to you and you're waiting for a weekly reset so that the devs turn on the next stage of the quest, which is already finished, done, it's in the game and ready to go, that it's just, you know, parceled out in order to artificially inflate your time. This in-game stuff doesn't bother me as much. Now, what I will say, though, is that the pacing of how this unlocks in your little Cypher system is absolutely terrible. This makes no sense. I think they were probably iterating on it on the PTR and ran out of time. You have some things that take literally days to unlock, and then most of the little bits of research take only 5 seconds. I started up one of these pieces of research before the weekend. I came back after the weekend, and it was still going. And I'm kind of sitting here thinking, why does this take so long? This is absolutely absurd. So yeah, this is a system that I think actually could work reasonably well, but really needs a whole lot of tweaks in terms of the timers. I don't think it needs those 5-second timers. Like, I'm cool waiting for an hour or something, you know, I'm used to mobile games at this point, but having to wait like 5 days plus for something to finish is just way too much. It doesn't need to be that long. Like, it's quite astounding to me how much worse it feels than having to gather the resources, you know? Like, if it was really expensive research to unlock, I had to collect lots of the resources and I could go grind it out, get it faster, but it might take me, you know, a good week's worth of collecting stuff to do it. That would feel good. But the fact that it's reasonably easy to collect this stuff, but then I have to sit there and watch this like almost 1 week timer tick down, that feels really, really bad. Let's switch then from a negative note to actually a very, very positive note, which is the return of tier sets and also double legendaries. I think this is a really good part of this patch, and this is one of the big reasons to come back. Although the gameplay itself of Zereth Mortis isn't anything particularly new, there's obviously the Tazavesh dungeons as well. The Mega Dungeon has been split into 2, and they're both part of Mythic Plus. We have the new raid as well. There is some new content, but a lot of it is very similar, very familiar. But it's the tier sets and the double legendaries that can really mix this up and make your spec gameplay, your class gameplay, feel very different. Tier sets, I think, are the biggest winner here, and at least they will be whenever the ability to craft them finally opens up. But a lot of these tier sets have very, very cool effects. So for example, I actually am playing a Balance Druid for the first time ever in this patch and having a ton of fun. But their 2-piece set, for example, calls down a free mini Fury of a Loon. This is the big laser beam, that, you know, like the orbital laser beam that comes down from the heavens. You get a mini one of those whenever you jump into a lunar eclipse. So that's super fun, right? It's a cool visual effect, gives you a ton of astral power that really speeds up your rotation, makes it more dynamic, and it happens frequently. So that's a big game-changing tier set, and that's only the 2-piece set, right? So it's stuff like that all coming in together across all these different specs that makes it very fun and very enjoyable. And for me, it gives me a pretty good motivation to go and check out some of those other specs, especially leading into the next expansion, that you get to try them out and play them in this sort of unique version of them, because these tier sets will go away. You'll never play the spec quite like this again, and I think that's really, really fun. Double legendaries, I think, is actually coming sooner. I think it comes this reset, so in 2 days here for me in Europe. But these double legendaries do have a big limitation in that you have to wear your Covenant legendary, and then you can choose your other legendary. So there is that limitation, but with the flexibility now of freely switching between Covenants with no restrictions that they added to the game, I think in 9.1.5. But yeah, I think pretty simply, let's say, I mean, you were playing a Frost Mage when Shadowlands first came out, and you played for a few weeks and then you quit. It does mean that when you come back now, that you're not just playing Frost Mage Shadowlands, which you've played before. You're now playing Frost Mage Shadowlands with a 2 and then eventually a 4-piece set bonus, which is going to completely change up your rotation. You're going to be able to hop between the different Covenants with a whole bunch of different legendaries on, and yeah, really experience a whole bunch of different gameplay styles and take those into battlegrounds, into arena, into dungeons, into raids, into world questing, whatever it is that you want to be doing. And I think that's really fun. I think that's great. So in terms of the spec gameplay, the class gameplay, I think that this patch is actually a pretty big winner, and that's going to be a big, big draw, especially for me later on in the patch, ramping up towards the next expansion. Yeah, I'm actually quite looking forward to it. Though once more, Timegating on being able to craft your tier sets, that's really going to slow that experience down for a lot of us now more casual players. Then the final thing I want to talk about is the story. Ooh, controversial. There's been some nasty stuff flying around the WoW community and Twitter all about this, which is no surprise to me. I've been a bit outspoken about not really being actually that big of a fan of the WoW community. It's very hit or miss. There's a lot of toxicity, so that's also something to be aware of. It's a really fun game when you have, a nice community, a nice guild or nice friends, meet some nice people to play with. But there's a lot of really horrible people out there, and you can have some really bad experiences in this game. That is definitely something to be very aware of. That is very real. But the story. Well, I actually kind of break it down into 2 main parts. So the biggest part, the broadest part, which is actually good, it's just the general sort of feel, the general sort of lore of the game, the smaller scale stuff. I think that works really well. I think it's been consistently good in World of Warcraft since, well, pretty much forever. So what I mean by this is, when you go into Zereth Mortis, and it's all that sort of incidental storytelling, it's the Dark Souls style storytelling. It's some of the cool little NPCs that you meet along the way. It's the sort of enemies that you're fighting, the environments you're going through. That idea of that world, of that immersive world and the stuff that's happening in it, that's actually done, I think, pretty well in this zone. Like, there's been some quests here and some enemy types and stuff that have been really intriguing, really interesting. I love the idea of this Cypher of the first ones, of slowly learning and unlocking this language that they're speaking and uncovering more secrets, all that sort of stuff. It's very, very fun. It's very, very cool. Now, where the game really falls short, though, and this is, I think, the thing that most people dislike, is the quote-unquote the main story, the main plot. This is something that they've just never got right since they started doing it. I mean, what was the main plot of classic WoW? There wasn't really a main plot. And what was the main plot of TBC? The Dark Portal is opened up again. Let's go in and let's stop him. And that was pretty much most of it, that was as much main plot as really we the players had. It was like, cool, we get to go and fight Kael'thas and Illidan, kill Jaden. Cool, let's go. The main plot of Wrath of the Lich King is, Arthas has woken up again. Let's go up there and stop him because he's bad. They're very, very simple plots. It was really, I feel, with Cataclysm onwards that they've tried to expand this idea of plot and the quote-unquote main characters of the game progressing and having character growth, or at least they're supposed to, all this sort of stuff, and they've really flopped on it. They just don't do a good job. And that's true, unfortunately, of Shadowlands as well, and of this patch very much as well. There's just so many characters, and there's actually relatively little time devoted to the main story. It often feels very much like there is this just big overarching plot, but they need to just blast through that plot relatively quickly. It doesn't get expanded on in the way that it needs. you know, there's so many characters involved that don't really do anything, or the stuff they do feels so arbitrary, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, there's been a lot of pushback about this, a lot of negative feedback, so we'll see if it changes in the future. But I mean, unless they throw away the main plot or really minimalize it like it was in those earlier expansions, I just don't think it's ever really going to work well, because, well, frankly, it never really has worked well. It's really those smaller scale stories that work better. I mean, one of my favorite sort of stories, even for just a patch, was, let's say, the Throne of the Thunder King in Mists of Pandaria, which was, this crazy old Mogu leader, this tyrant that we've kind of read about, heard hints about in the lore. He's been resurrected. Bam! He's coming to get us. He's coming to rebuild his empire. Let's go and stop him, you know? And you arrive and it's this super cool island with lightning flying everywhere and dinosaurs and cultists. And yeah, it's like that's the level of story that works well in WoW. It's that, it's a simple main plot, but with really cool world building. So hopefully, we'll see if that's something they go back to. But if you're expecting that level of stuff from Shadowlands, it's just not there. There's a lot of main plot and it's really, really bad. There you go, guys. That is my thoughts, complete thoughts on WoW patch 9.2. The good, the bad, the ugly. Is it worth coming back to play? So broadly speaking, I do think that, if you are interested in coming back and playing Shadowlands, I think that this is definitely the patch, or it will be the patch, to come back and try it. There's a bunch of really cool stuff here, from tier sets and double legendaries, mixing up your class gameplay, to a really cool zone to explore, a lot of quality of life improvements by now across the expansion to things like Torghast, the Covenant system, all that sort of stuff. And it's just a beautiful, interesting zone that, is it worth whatever, 10, 15 euro, whatever much it is, and wherever you live, is it worth that to come back and check it out and have a few enjoyable hours? Yeah, I think so for sure. And then diving in, perhaps with your tier sets, to things like dungeons and battlegrounds and stuff, I think you'll have a good time there as well. However, I don't know if you need to rush back right now. Honestly, like I said, because of time gating, the patch experience right now, at time of recording, is just objectively worse than what your experience is going to be 1 month from now, 2 months from now. So I mean, it just really depends. Are you interested in sort of the hype of the new stuff? Are you interested in diving in and experiencing the new whatever Mythic plus affix to the new raid on that first wave of players where everything is new? If you are, then sure, come check it out. But if you are kind of more casual, more on the fence, you probably should wait. That's the honest truth. Right now, I'd give the patch, I don't know, maybe a 7 out of 10. It's got some good stuff in there, but it's still lacking a lot of bits. I do think that as we go further, I think this patch has the potential to be a good 8, maybe even 9 out of 10. I think it's got some really good potential, this patch, but you just have to wait for that time gating stuff to fade away. So maybe stay tuned, hop back in 3 months before the next expansion. Wait until there's a patch 9.2.5. Ever the waiting game with World of Warcraft, unfortunately. I guess we just hope that the next expansion, that the plummeting popularity of the game might finally kick them into making some genuine changes. We shall see. But thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.